Alien allies request support, while humans mobilize their weakest fleet. Best HFY stories. The message came through the galactic communications network just as the sun began to set on Earth. It was a routine transmission, one that had become all too common in the past few years. But this time, there was an edge to it, a tone that sent chills down the spines of even the most battle-hardened diplomats. The Androsians, an ancient and revered species, were calling for help. Humanity, we are in dire need of your assistance. The voice of Androsian High Commander Zarak crackled through the calms. The Korthii have struck again. We've fought them off for as long as we can, but our forces are overstretched. We request you send your fleet to assist in the defense of the Helios sector. The message was received with gravity, but Earth had a problem. The humans, despite their newfound alliances and remarkable technological advancements, did not have the military might of the Androsians, the Zynth, or the Solarians. Their fleet was small, and what they lacked in numbers, they made up for with ingenuity and determination. But there was one glaring issue: their fleet, at this moment, was spread thin across a dozen different sectors. The highest-ranking officials gathered in a dimly lit war room, the flickering light from the massive holographic maps casting long shadows on their faces. General Sarah Collins, commander of the Earth Defense Fleet, stood at the center of the table, her arms folded, staring at the projection of the Helios sector. The Korthii, a brutal and ruthless species, had been carving a bloody path across the galaxy, and now they were closing in on the Androsian homeworld. "We don't have the strength," Sarah said, breaking the silence. "Our fleets spread across the galaxy, and our reserves are minimal, but we have no choice. Our allies need us." Her second-in-command, Lieutenant Richard Hayes, hesitated. "General, with all due respect, we don't even have our best ships available. Most of our advanced vessels are tied up in border defense. The ships we have left, they're not up to the task." Sarah turned to him, her eyes sharp. "Sometimes, it's not about what we have, it's about what we're willing to do with it." The decision was made. The fleet that Earth sent to the Helios sector was not its strongest or most advanced, but it was made up of a diverse and determined crew. The Lancer fleet, as it was now known, consisted of older human ships, some relics from the early days of space exploration, others hastily upgraded with newer technology. Their armor was thick, their weapons powerful, but their real strength came from the crew, a ragtag group of humans who had proven time and time again that they could overcome any odds. The Androsians, by contrast, were magnificent warriors, their ships sleek and graceful, with weapons capable of devastating entire fleets. But even they knew they couldn't win this battle alone. The Korthii, with their overwhelming numbers and relentless tactics, were a formidable enemy. When the Lancer fleet arrived at the Helios sector, the scene was one of chaos. Androsian ships, though technologically superior, were battered and strained. The Korthii were closing in fast, their fleets far larger than anything humanity had ever faced. General Collins stood on the bridge of the flagship, resolute, watching as the first Korthii ships appeared on their sensors. There were hundreds of them, more than she had ever seen. The odds were stacked impossibly against them. "All hands, brace for impact," she ordered. But then, as the first shots were fired, something remarkable happened. Despite their aging ships and limited firepower, the humans fought with a ferocity and tenacity that was unmatched. They were outnumbered, but they weren't outmatched in heart. The Resolute dove headfirst into the fray, its outdated guns firing with deadly precision. The Korthii were caught off guard by the unexpected resilience of the human ships. They had underestimated humanity's will to survive, to protect their allies, and to push forward even when the deck was stacked against them. Captain Maria Vega, commanding the Thunderstrike, a battered but reliable cruiser, led the charge. Her ship was a mess of mismatched parts and systems on the verge of collapse. But she didn't care. She'd seen worse, and she knew her crew better than anyone. "Keep pushing, we're not backing down," she shouted, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. The Androsians, who had never seen such a desperate yet determined fight, rallied behind the humans. They were fierce warriors, but they had never fought with the same kind of resolve that humanity possessed. It wasn't just about defending a world or a sector. It was about protecting everything they stood for, everything they had worked for. As the battle raged on, the Korthii began to falter. They were confused by the human tactics, unpredictable, unconventional, and relentless. The humans had no grand strategy or overwhelming firepower, but they had something that the Korthii hadn't counted on: sheer, unyielding spirit. It took days of fighting, but in the end, the Korthii were driven back. The battle wasn't a victory in the traditional sense, but it was a victory nonetheless. The Helios sector was secure, and the Androsians had been saved. Zerak, the Androsian commander, stood before General Collins after the battle, his eyes full of respect. "You've done what none of us thought possible," he said. "You have shown us that strength isn't just in the size of a fleet or the power of its weapons. It's in the will to fight, no matter the odds." Sarah smiled, her tired eyes softening. "We may not have the biggest fleet, but we have something more important. We have each other, and we'll fight until the end." The humans had done the impossible, not with the most advanced technology or the largest fleet, but with their courage, determination, and unity. And in that moment, every alien race in the galaxy realized one simple truth. Humanity, though young in the grand scheme of the universe, was not to be underestimated. Alien allies request support. While humans mobilize their weakest fleet, Best HFY Stories continued. Months passed since the battle for the Helios sector, but the aftershocks of humanity's unexpected victory still rippled across the galaxy. The Korthii were not easily deterred, and their defeat stung deeply. Rumors began to circulate that they were regrouping, calling upon their most formidable warlords, and reinforcing their fleets with mercenaries from distant, savage worlds. The Androsians, while grateful for the human intervention, understood that the Korthii would strike again, stronger and angrier. They had fought a bitter war for centuries, and their pride wouldn't let them back down. Now, the question remained: could humanity continue to stand against a growing threat with their outdated and insufficient fleet? Once again, the humans found themselves in a tough position. The Resolute and its sister ships were patched together with what little resources the Earth Defense Fleet could scrape together. The majority of their most advanced ships were still stationed on the outer rim, trying to secure colonies from raiders and other emerging threats. Their true strength was a fleet of ships too old to fight at full capacity, led by officers who knew how to stretch every resource to its maximum potential. But there was something else that humans had, something that no one else could quite grasp: an indomitable spirit. General Sarah Collins found herself standing at the front of a war council again. The room was filled with the same faces that had shared the burden of the Helios sector battle. She stood before a holomap of the Korthii-controlled zones, where the Korthii warlords had begun massing their forces for what would undoubtedly be another devastating campaign. "We need to prepare for another wave," Sarah said, her voice steady. "But this time, we won't be able to rely on any reinforcements. We're going to fight with what we have, again." Her voice rang through the room, but this time, there was a hardened edge to it. Sarah wasn't just speaking to the assembled officers, she was speaking to herself, too. The truth was, she wasn't sure they could win again. The Korthii had learned from their mistakes. They would be prepared for the human unpredictability, and the gap in strength would be even more evident. But there was no turning back. "This is what we do," Sarah continued. "When the odds are stacked against us, we turn the tables, we surprise them, we hit them where they're weak." Lieutenant Hayes, who had been quiet until now, raised an eyebrow. "General, are we really going to throw ourselves into another fight with nothing but broken ships and understrength crews? I've seen it work before, but this is different. This might be the end of the line." "I don't believe that," Sarah said, shaking her head. "We've beaten the Korthii once. We can do it again. We just have to be smarter, and we'll need all the help we can get." This time, Sarah turned to her other allies, the Androsians, the ZYNTH, the Solarians. They were all on edge after their last encounter with the Korthii. But this battle would need more than just raw strength. It would require cunning, trickery, and the kind of sacrifice that only humans were willing to make. The message went out, not just to the Androsians but to every willing species. The response was overwhelming. While many races offered their technologically superior ships, they also gave something else: their expertise in areas that humans had yet to fully grasp. The Androsians offered tactical support. The ZYNTH shared their expertise in stealth technology, and the Solarians provided intelligence and strategies learned over millennia of warfare. Yet, Despite the galactic cooperation, it was the humans' role that stood out. Their tactics, which combined deception, unorthodox strikes, and an uncanny ability to operate in the most dire of circumstances, would lead the charge. This wasn't just another battle, this was humanity's defining moment. The humans' plan, conceived by General Collins herself, was deceptively simple. They would take the Korthii by surprise using the very things that had worked in their favor before, their underestimation of human ingenuity and their relentless willingness to fight. The Lancer fleet, though small, had become something of a legend. The aging ships were heavily modified, their systems enhanced with every trick in the book, every unorthodox strategy humanity could manage. The crew, made up of the most diverse and battle-hardened individuals, knew their ships better than any alien could. They knew every flaw, every weakness, and every advantage. The final push would happen in the heart of the Korthii stronghold, where their warlords had assembled their most formidable fleet. This would be the ultimate test. Could the Lancer fleet, with its patched-together vessels, outsmart a numerically superior and technologically advanced enemy? The first engagement began with a sudden wave of Korthii warships emerging from the dark reaches of space. The Lancer fleet was outnumbered again, but Sarah had made sure their tactics were unpredictable. The ships moved in tight, unexpected formations, using the gravity wells of nearby planets and asteroid fields to shield their movements. "What's their next move?" Sarah asked, glancing at the tactical map. "We're drawing them in," Lieutenant Hayes replied, grinning. "It's a classic human trick, use their arrogance against them. They think we're easy pickings, they won't know what hit them." And just like before, the Korthii fell into the trap. They had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt and outthink their adversaries. The Lancer fleet lured the Korthii into a narrow pocket of space surrounded by debris from a long-dead planet, creating chaos in their formations. It was the perfect setup for a full assault. The battle was brutal, but the Korthii were caught completely off guard. The humans used every trick they had learned from previous engagements: decoys, misdirection, and unexpected ambushes. Their ships may have been weaker in firepower, but they were faster, more agile, and harder to predict. By the end of the conflict, the Korthii warlords had been routed, their fleet in tatters. The human fleet, though battered, emerged victorious once more. As the dust settled, Zarak and the other alien leaders stood before General Collins. The awe in their eyes was unmistakable. "Once again, you have done what seemed impossible," Zarak said. "Not through overwhelming force, but through sheer will and ingenuity. You have proven that humanity is not just a force to be reckoned with, you are a force of nature." Sarah smiled, her eyes tired but proud. "We may not have the biggest fleet, or the most advanced technology, but we have something that no one else does. We fight for each other, and we never stop. We'll keep standing, no matter what." And in that moment, the galaxy knew something crucial: humanity had earned its place in the stars. It wasn't through strength alone, but through courage, determination, and the unyielding will to protect those they called allies. The Korthii learned that lesson the hard way, but it was humanity that would forever change the tide of the war. Alien allies request support. While humans mobilize their weakest fleet, Best HFY Stories continued. The aftermath of the victory over the Korthii was met with a mixture of triumph and cautious optimism. The Androsians, Zynth, Solarians, and other alien allies of humanity marveled at the ingenuity and perseverance of the human fleet. But even in victory, a lingering sense of dread hung over the galactic community. The Korthii had been beaten back, but they were not defeated. The warlords of their empire had retreated into the deepest corners of space, licking their wounds and preparing for what they believed would be their final, crushing blow. The truth was, the galactic peace that had been hard-won through alliances and mutual defense was fragile. The Korthii's defeat only postponed the inevitable, another attack. And this time, they would be more prepared. It was only a matter of time before they struck again. General Sarah Collins sat alone in the war room, staring at the holographic display of the galaxy. Her mind raced as she thought about the next steps. The Lancer fleet had shown the universe that humanity could stand toe-to-toe with anyone. But the truth remained, their fleet was still weak, outdated, and underfunded. They couldn't keep relying on sheer luck and bravery forever. Their enemies would adapt. The Korthii would adapt. They needed to think ahead. "General, we've got an update," Lieutenant Hayes said as he entered the room, his face grim. "The Korthii are amassing their forces again. It's bigger than before, they're calling it the Final Wrath." Sarah's stomach tightened. The last thing they needed was a force large enough to crush the fragile peace they'd fought so hard to establish. "How big are we talking?" "Big enough that we may not be able to stop them with the current fleet," Hayes replied. "They've learned from their mistakes. They've consolidated their best warlords, brought in mercenaries, and they're using new technology we haven't seen before." Sarah rubbed her temples. "Great. Just what we needed." Her mind raced. And then, something clicked. The solution wasn't in more firepower or advanced ships. Humanity's strength lay in what they had always relied on, the human spirit. It was time to start thinking beyond conventional warfare. "Gather everyone," Sarah ordered, after making a series of calls. "We're going to need every resource we can muster, but not the way you think. We're going to outsmart them, not overpower them." The War Council convened, this time with a clear understanding that victory wasn't going to come from force alone. The Korthii's technological advantage, their superior numbers, and their willingness to fight to the death were formidable. But humanity, despite their weaker fleet, had something no one else could replicate: adaptability. Sarah and her team spent the next several weeks preparing a new strategy. While the Korthii honed their battle plans for brute force, the humans would focus on misdirection, guerrilla tactics, and psychological warfare. It wouldn't be about outgunning the Korthii. It would be about making them doubt their superiority, sowing confusion, and hitting them where they least expected it. The final wrath came sooner than expected. The Korthii warlords, now united under a single banner, launched their largest offensive yet. Hundreds of warships, accompanied by waves of mercenary fleets, set their sights on the heart of the Galactic Alliance. The humans, ready with their strategy, split their forces in a way no one had ever anticipated. Instead of grouping their ships in the expected battle formations, the Lancer fleet scattered their vessels across multiple sectors. They created decoys using a mix of drones and old, poorly equipped ships modified to look like their best warships. The Korthii, desperate to crush the Alliance, took the bait. 4 weeks, the Korthii were drawn into a series of calculated ambushes, fake retreats, and surprise raids. The Korthii, always used to being the hunters, found themselves slowly becoming the prey. Ships that should have been easy pickings for their vast numbers vanished into asteroid fields, jumped between nebulae, and even performed lightning-fast strikes on weak points in their fleet. The humans were everywhere, yet nowhere. The turning point came when the Korthii, frustrated and increasingly erratic, began to splinter. Their commanders began to question the unity of their forces. In some cases, entire battalions pulled back or turned on each other. The Korthii were fighters, yes. They had been bred for combat, but they had never faced an enemy like humanity. The more the humans vanished into the background, the more the Korthii began to lose their focus, their cohesion, and their pride. In the midst of this, Sarah Collins and the human fleet capitalized on one weakness that no one expected: the Korthii warlords themselves. The humans, with help from their alien allies, launched a covert operation to infiltrate Korthii command ships and spread misinformation. The message? The humans were only the first wave. The real force of the Galactic Alliance was on its way. A lie, of course, but one that fractured the Korthii's confidence even further. On the final day of the final wrath, when the Korthii were scattered across the galaxy, fighting their own allies and questioning their every move, the Lancer fleet launched a surprise strike against the largest Korthii warlord's flagship, the Dominance. The Korthii flagship, a towering behemoth of dark metal and sharpened edges, was not prepared for the human assault. The Resolute and the Thunderstrike led the charge, with all other human vessels joining in. This time, the humans were not just outthinking their enemies, they were striking decisively and with unmatched ferocity. It was over in hours. The Korthii flagship was crippled, and the warlords themselves either captured or killed. The remaining Korthii forces, leaderless and broken, scattered into the void. When the dust finally settled, the galaxy was in shock. The humans had done it again. The final wrath was nothing more than a footnote in the history of the war. The Korthii, humbled and broken, withdrew into the deep corners of the galaxy. The Galactic Alliance stood victorious, though it had been at the edge of the abyss. Sarah Collins stood once more before the assembly of galactic leaders, her face weary but proud. She was no longer just the leader of humanity's fleet. She was the leader of a galaxy that had learned the value of what humanity brought to the table, not just their ships or their technology, but their unrelenting will to fight, no matter how insurmountable the odds. Zarak, the Androsian High Commander, clasped her shoulder. "You've saved us all, General. You've proven that there is no force stronger than the will of humanity." Sarah looked out at the faces of her allies, some old, some new, and nodded. "We may not always have the biggest fleet, the sharpest weapons, or the most advanced technology, but we have something no one can take from us, and we will never stop fighting for the future." And in that moment, the galaxy knew something the Korthii had learned the hard way. Humanity wasn't just a force to be reckoned with. They were the last line of defense, the heart of the galaxy, and the most dangerous ally anyone could hope for. For the humans had shown, once again, that no matter how small or weak they seemed, they could stand against any foe and win. Alien allies request support. While humans mobilize their weakest fleet, Best HFY Stories continued. The victory over the Korthii had left a permanent mark on the galaxy. No longer was humanity just a fledgling species, struggling to make a name in the vast expanse of space. They had proven themselves to be a formidable force, one that would never be underestimated again. Yet, as the dust of the final wrath settled, new challenges loomed, both within and beyond the galaxy. Humanity's victories, while monumental, had come at a cost. The fleet was strained, the resources depleted, and there was only so much more they could do with the patchwork ships they had. Despite this, General Sarah Collins and her commanders were aware that peace in the galaxy was fragile. If the Korthii hadn't been dealt with for good, then who else would come for them next? Who else would test humanity's resolve? It started with a single distress signal, a faint, hurried message sent by the Velker, a peaceful species that had once been allies with the humans. The Velker were an advanced, non-aggressive race known for their vast network of knowledge, trading expertise, and diplomatic skills. They were a cornerstone of the galactic peace that had been built. But now, their planet was under threat. "General Collins, we need your help." The Velker ambassador's voice crackled over the calms. "The Zoroth have broken through our defenses. We are outmatched. Please, humanity, we're desperate." Sarah's heart sank. The Zoroth were a brutal, war-hungry species, infamous for their scorched earth tactics and relentless campaigns. They had long been a threat to peaceful civilizations, but the Velker had always managed to keep them at bay, until now. The message continued, desperation thick in the Velker's voice. "We cannot hold on much longer. If we fall, it will signal the end of all the fragile alliances we have worked so hard to establish. We need reinforcements, anything you can send." The choice was clear. The human fleet, still bruised and battle-worn from their victory over the Korthii, had no choice but to respond. They couldn't afford to lose another ally, especially not one as critical as the Velker. "Prepare the fleet," Sarah ordered. "We may not have the best ships, but we'll fight like we always have. We'll protect them." The journey to Velker was long, and the fleet was already worn out from constant operations and minimal recovery. It was a ragtag collection of ships, most of them relics from humanity's early space explorations or hastily upgraded with whatever could be scavenged after the war with the Korthii. But as they arrived in Velker's system, the size of the threat became clear. The Zoroth warships were a terrifying sight, massive, jagged vessels that resembled living, breathing creatures more than machines. They appeared to be carved from the bones of some monstrous species, a nightmarish collection of metal and biology fused together in a way that made the human ships look like toys. The Velker fleet, though technologically advanced in their own right, was no match for the Zoroth's overwhelming numbers and sheer brutality. Sarah stood at the helm of the Resolute, staring at the map of the Velker system. It was a dangerous situation, but she couldn't afford to hesitate. "We'll have to fight smart," she said, her voice cutting through the quiet tension in the room. "We don't have the firepower, but we can use the terrain. The Velker system has a series of gas giants and asteroid fields. We'll force them into a battle they aren't prepared for." Lieutenant Hayes, ever the optimist, added, "We can't win a slugfest with them, but we can make them chase shadows. We hit them fast, we hit them hard, and we keep moving." Sarah nodded. "Exactly. and we'll have to make them believe they're facing more than they really are. The humans' plan was as unconventional as it was daring. Instead of making a direct assault, they used guerrilla tactics to draw the Zoroth into the asteroid fields. The Resolute and its fleet would engage in hit-and-run strikes, creating false signals, using decoys, and creating confusion among the enemy ranks. The Zoroth, accustomed to overwhelming force, took the bait. They pursued the humans' ships relentlessly, confident that they would crush them under their vast numbers. But the humans had learned well. They knew how to use every advantage, no matter how small, to their favor. The first skirmish was chaos. The human ships darted through the asteroid field, their outdated systems barely able to keep pace with the Zoroth's advanced targeting technology. But they made the Zoroth follow them into narrow corridors between the asteroids. The humans set off a series of electromagnetic pulses, disabling a few of the Zoroth's ships temporarily, just long enough to pick off a few stragglers. "This is working," Hayes said, as another Zoroth warship was crippled by a well-placed shot. "They're getting frustrated." The frustration quickly turned into confusion. The Zoroth had never encountered an enemy who fought like this, constantly retreating, always staying one step ahead, always moving. Each ambush was a battle of wits, not just weapons, and each time they believed they had the upper hand, the humans would vanish, only to reappear somewhere else and strike again. The real surprise came when the humans, using their dwindling resources and the Velker's technology, activated a set of false distress signals. The Zoroth fleet, believing they had trapped the last of the human forces, scattered to respond. It was the perfect distraction. With most of their forces divided, the humans attacked the Zoroth command ship. Their target was not the ship's massive weapons array but its communications center. If the Zoroth could no longer coordinate their fleet, they would fall apart. The Resolute led the final charge, a kamikaze-style assault that drew the Zoroth's fire just long enough for a group of human infiltrators to breach the command ship's interior. The Zoroth, now in disarray, tried to regroup, but it was too late. Without communication, their ships fought amongst themselves, unable to coordinate against the humans' precise, unpredictable strikes. By the end of the battle, the Zoroth fleet was in shambles. The survivors limped away, unwilling to face another human-led attack. The Velker were saved, and the galaxy was, once again, indebted to humanity. The aftermath was quiet. The Velker, though immensely grateful, knew that this was just another chapter in humanity's ongoing saga. Sarah Collins stood before the Velker leaders, their once gleaming city now in ruins from the battle, and gave a weary but resolute smile. "You fought well," the Velker ambassador said, his voice thick with gratitude. "We did not expect your help, and certainly not in this manner. Humanity's strength is more than just its military might. It is your ingenuity, your spirit, and your willingness to fight when there is no hope left." Sarah's smile faded slightly. "It's what we do. We protect our allies, and we fight for our future." In that moment, Sarah knew that humanity had forged another bond, not through superior firepower, but through something far more valuable: trust, resolve, and the unwavering belief that no matter how dark the galaxy might become, humans would always stand as a light in the void. And no one would ever again underestimate them. The Zoroth had learned this lesson too well. As they retreated into the depths of space, they realized that their might had been a mere illusion, shattered by a species they had once dismissed as weak. Humanity was no longer the underdog. They were a force to be reckoned with, a galaxy-altering presence that could, and would, protect their allies against any who dared challenge them. Alien allies request support. While humans mobilize their weakest fleet, Best HFY Stories continued. The galaxy had begun to heal after the Zoroth threat was neutralized. The Velker were recovering, their cities slowly rebuilt, and their people grateful for the humans' intervention. As the galaxy's fragile alliances solidified, a sense of cautious optimism began to take root. However, there were whispers among the stars, distant signals, rogue fleets, and unsettling patterns in the void. Something, or someone, was watching, waiting. Humanity had earned its place among the galaxy's elite powers, but it had also made new enemies. As Sarah Collins sat at the helm of the Resolute one quiet evening, she couldn't shake the feeling that the universe had already begun shifting again. Whatever new challenge lay ahead, humanity would face it, as always, with their unique blend of resilience and ingenuity. The first signs came from the Farron Empire, an ancient civilization. The Farron had remained in seclusion for centuries, their vast empire shrouded in secrecy. Their ships were the stuff of legend, biological warcraft that blended with their surroundings, nearly invisible to sensors, capable of unmatched destruction. The Farron were rumored to be capable of war on a scale that no other species could imagine. Sarah received the first distress signal from the Orkan Coalition, an ally that bordered the Farron territory. Their message was simple, but its implications were grave. Farron ships are moving. We need immediate assistance. The Orkans were a strong, militaristic species, but even they could not stand against the ancient might of the Farron. Sarah immediately convened a war council. This time, it wasn't just the humans, the Velker, or even the Androsians. This time, the entire galaxy was on edge. We've dealt with the Korthii, the Zoroth, but this is something different, Sarah said, as the council assembled in the war room. The Farron are an ancient race, and their fleet is unlike anything we've ever faced. We can't afford to underestimate them. Lieutenant Hayes was the first to speak. They'll have superior technology. Their ships are alive. How do you fight something like that? We fight like we always do, Sarah replied, her tone resolute. We use our wits. We use what we have. We adapt. The situation quickly escalated. The Farron had already begun their advance, their biological warships surging through the space lanes with deadly precision. Their forces moved at an alarming speed, outpacing any intelligence the Galactic Alliance could gather. Entire systems fell dark as the Farron took control of planets with terrifying efficiency, not through overwhelming force, but through complete infiltration. They've already infiltrated our communications network, one of the human tech officers reported. Any message we send gets intercepted and redirected. They've turned our own systems against us. Sarah's mind was racing. The key to defeating the Farron wasn't just in fighting them, it was in preventing them from having control over everything they touched. Humanity had faced overwhelming odds before, but this was a new kind of war, one where the enemy was everywhere, invisible and insidious. Then we do what we've always done, Sarah said. We disrupt them. The plan was simple, if not insane. The human fleet would once again be the spearhead, drawing the Farron's attention and forcing them into a defensive posture. They would use their technological advantage, what little they had, to create chaos in the Farron's lines, disorienting them long enough for the larger, more powerful fleets of the Galactic Alliance to launch a counteroffensive. Human ingenuity had always been the difference maker. Sarah knew that if they could disable the Farron's network and slow their advance, they might just be able to turn the tide. But to do that, they needed to outwit their enemies in a way no one else could. The Resolute and the rest of the Lancer fleet once again became the backbone of the defense. This time, however, it was not just about brute force. Human ships were equipped with experimental stealth technology borrowed from the Velker and adapted for the mission at hand. They would slip through the Farron's sensors, strike where they were least expected, and cripple their infrastructure. The plan was risky, but Sarah's confidence never wavered. The Lancer fleet would lead the charge, using their unmatched agility to cut through the chaos of war. They would make the Farron believe they were fighting a war on multiple fronts, with far more enemies than they could handle. The first strike came in the distant Drax's system. The Resolute darted between asteroids, utilizing the cover of a nearby gas giant to hide their approach. The Farron had already taken the system, their forces entrenched on the moons of Drax's, but they had not expected a direct strike on their most vulnerable asset, their flagship, the Vermeroth. Human ships scattered throughout the system, hitting Farron supply lines, sabotaging their ships, and causing havoc within their communications systems. The Farron, taken by surprise, scrambled to regroup, but it was already too late. The Resolute and its sister ships, taking advantage of the Farron's disorganization, launched a devastating attack on the Vermeroth itself. The battle was swift and brutal. The Vermeroth, despite its advanced technology, was not prepared for the guerrilla tactics humanity employed. Using their superior mobility, the human fleet outmaneuvered the larger, bulkier Farron ships, striking from unexpected angles and retreating before the enemy could retaliate. The final blow came when the human fleet's infiltration team, led by none other than Lieutenant Hayes, successfully bypassed the Farron's defensive shields. breaching the flagship's core systems. The Farron flagship fell, and with it, the morale of the Farron fleet began to crumble. The Farron were not accustomed to fighting enemies they couldn't anticipate. They were, after all, a species that relied on overwhelming strength and control. But humanity had once again proven that brute force alone couldn't win every war. "General," Hayes said, walking into the war room as Sarah stood watching the battle unfold on the holoscreen. "We've done it. The Farron are retreating. Their fleet is broken." Sarah allowed herself a moment to breathe. The victory was bittersweet, but it was hard-earned. The Farron, once thought invincible, had been shown the power of unity, unpredictability, and the sheer determination of a species that refused to give up. The cost, however, had been high. While the Alliance had repelled the Farron invasion, the scars left behind would take years, if not decades, to heal. The war had proven that, despite their victories, humanity still relied on their allies for survival, and that the galaxy would always be a dangerous place, full of threats both known and unknown. Sarah Collins stood before the assembly of galactic leaders once more, their faces solemn. The Velker, Androsians, and others were all there, acknowledging the sacrifice and resilience humanity had shown. "You've done it again, General." Zarak, the Androsian High Commander, said with a deep bow. "The Farron may be gone for now, but it is clear, humanity will always be a force the galaxy must reckon with." Sarah nodded, her face tired but unyielding. "We don't fight for recognition, we fight for each other. We fight to protect the future, and no matter what comes next, we will stand ready." As the galaxy began to heal from yet another war, it became clear that humanity, with its boundless courage and unrelenting will, was no longer just a power to be respected. They were the heart of the galaxy, and anyone who dared to challenge that would soon learn that humans were never, ever, to be underestimated. Alien allies request support. While humans mobilize their weakest fleet, best HFY stories, continued. The galaxy, though temporarily at peace, was always a restless place. The victory over the Farron, the brutal war that had ravaged entire star systems, left behind an uneasy calm. The allies of humanity, while grateful, were wary. The threat of another invasion, another war, seemed like an ever-present shadow. But this time, humanity was different. They were not the underdogs they once were. They were the galaxy's guardians. Sarah Collins stood before the vast holographic map of the galaxy, her fingers tracing the familiar patterns of war. Her mind was racing. After the fall of the Farron, there had been rumors of a new threat in the Outer Rim, a strange, silent race, the Kelrith. Not much was known about them, except that they had started to slowly absorb the territories they encountered, almost as if they were a parasite, feeding off the resources and civilizations they came across, leaving nothing but lifeless worlds in their wake. It had started as whispers, small, almost insignificant reports from a few distant planets, but the stories had grown. It seemed that no one was immune, not even the great empires of the galaxy. The Orkan coalition, ever eager for war, had fallen back in fear. The Velker had barely escaped with their lives after a sudden and overwhelming assault. The Kelrith were not just invaders, they were something else entirely. Sarah had no time to waste. Her fleet was tired, her ships old, but they had done the impossible before. They would do it again. "Get me the council," she ordered. The galactic leaders assembled quickly. There was no time for formalities. The tension was palpable. The Kelrith had already taken 3 systems, and intelligence had confirmed that they were moving toward the Androsian heartland. If they couldn't be stopped, they would unravel the galaxy's fragile alliances. General Collins, Zarak, the Androsian High Commander, spoke first, his voice low and full of foreboding. "The Kelrith are unlike anything we've faced before. They move in silence. They do not communicate, at least not in any way we understand. Their ships don't fire typical weapons. They seem to drain energy, cripple systems from the inside out. We've been unable to stop them with conventional methods. Then we fight unconventionally," Sarah said, her voice sharp and determined. "We fight with what we have. We don't need the largest fleet. We don't need the most advanced ships. What we need is what we've always had, ingenuity. We need to think like humans." Lieutenant Hayes nodded. "It's been a while since we used the OL disruptor tactics, but it's the only thing that might work here." Sarah glanced at the map of the systems the Kelrith had taken. We'll use their silence against them. No direct assault. Instead, we lure them into an ambush, confuse them, make them fight battles they can't win. We draw them into the heart of their own territory and break their momentum." Zarak and the others exchanged looks, and then Zarak spoke again, his voice more resolute. "Your plan, General. We will follow it. But we must act quickly. The Kelrith are already en route to the Androsian core." The strategy was set. The Resolute led the charge, flanked by smaller human vessels, which had been retrofitted with scavenged technology. The human fleet, though outgunned and underpowered compared to other galactic forces, was far more adaptable, willing to fight in ways no one expected. They would use misdirection, cloaked vessels, and unconventional methods of attack, blending technology from the Velker, Androsians, and humans. The first phase of the operation involved creating chaos. Humanity had discovered that the Kelrith had no means of tracking enemy vessels once they moved outside of a certain range. Using this knowledge, the humans scattered their forces across several systems, placing decoys and utilizing energy shields to mimic the presence of much larger fleets. The idea was to overwhelm the Kelrith with so many potential targets that they wouldn't be able to focus their energy-draining weapons on any one ship for long. The fleet moved into position at the Zoran Nebula, an area dense with ion storms. It was a natural blind spot in the Kelrith's tracking systems. The humans, with their makeshift technology, used this as their advantage, darting in and out of the nebula, attacking in waves. The Kelrith ships, still reliant on draining energy, had no way of tracking which ships were real and which were decoys. The first few strikes went unnoticed by the Kelrith, but the humans didn't relent. They sabotaged energy conduits and hacked into the Kelrith's systems, causing their energy-draining weapons to malfunction. It was not about destroying the enemy directly, it was about crippling their ability to fight back. Every moment of disarray, every small victory, was a step toward their larger goal. Days passed, and the Kelrith began to show signs of frustration. They attacked more recklessly, cutting through decoy after decoy, but never getting any closer to the real human fleet. Sarah knew it wouldn't be long before they would try something different. She anticipated they would strike at the heart of the decoys, where the real fleet was hidden. And she was right. The Kelrith, in desperation, moved their forces to the deepest corners of the nebula, searching for the Resolute and its allies. The humans, anticipating this move, launched a coordinated strike, using their stealth and the cover of the nebula to hit the Kelrith where they were weakest. It was a fierce battle. The human ships were outnumbered, but they fought with a fury that no one had expected. The Resolute led the charge, using every trick they had learned from past battles to stay one step ahead. The Kelrith, despite their advanced technology, were unprepared for the relentless human tactics. Lieutenant Hayes barked orders as the Resolute raked the enemy lines with rapid-fire plasma bursts. "Keep them off balance. Don't give them a moment to think." It was not a battle of overwhelming force. It was a battle of wills, and the Kelrith were not used to an enemy that could outthink them at every turn. Hours later, the Kelrith forces were in full retreat. The ambush had worked. The Kelrith were no longer a unified threat, and their fleet was scattered, confused, and crippled. The human fleet, though battered, had won. They had once again outsmarted their enemy and secured a victory where brute strength alone would have failed. As the smoke of battle cleared, Sarah looked out over the battlefield, her heart pounding but her resolve unshaken. "We've done it. Again." Zarak's voice came over the comms, filled with both admiration and awe. "General Collins, your tactics have saved us once more. We may never understand how your people think, but we know this: humanity will always be our greatest ally." Sarah allowed herself a brief smile, though it was tinged with exhaustion. "We don't need to be understood. We just need to be ready for whatever comes next." The galaxy was, for the moment, safe, but Sarah knew that this peace, like all others, would be fleeting. Humanity had earned its place, not through the strength of its weapons, but through the power of its will, and the galaxy, watching from the shadows, had learned a valuable lesson. Never underestimate humanity. For as long as there were stars in the sky, humanity would be there, standing tall, ready to face any threat, no matter how daunting or impossible, and ensuring that the light of hope would never go out.